animals are destined to live in overpopulated, industrialized Western Europe and rarely see a human being. Due to ecological accident, there is such a patch of wildness on the delta of the Rhone River in southern France. It shelters thousands of species, millions of individuals. Like other wild places in the industrialized world, it has not been hospitable to man. He has left it to the animals, so far. The Camargue is delta land, a soft tongue of silt thrust out of the mouth of the Rhone. Most of the soil comes from the north, carried by the Rhone and its tributaries. To the south, the river grows sluggish. The heavy stuff sinks. Only the finest is carried to the mouth, where, deposited as silt, it continuously recreates the Camargue. The paths of the Rhone to the sea have changed often. In a 17th century map of the Camargue, the French put the Mediterranean at the top. By comparison, a modern map of the region shows a very different picture. The shape of the river and its delta changes over the centuries. Flat, windswept, and at the sea's mercy, the heart of the Camargue has so far resisted man. Nothing is so rare as a calm day on this delta, where persistent winds send the thin soil flying toward the sea, buffet the vegetation, evaporate the water. The different winds here have more than 50 names. The most famous and violent is the Mistral, a dry wind that blows nobody good. Salt moves through the water and soil and limits the life forms. Legacy of the sea, it foams and scuds the surfaces of lagoons saltier than the sea itself. The Mediterranean, constantly nibbling away, checks the growth of the Camargue and defines its shoreline. Between sea and river, salt and wind, the lower delta holds a precarious balance. Men call the place desolate, and it is. But it teems with life. Marine creatures share the fine sand beach with few others. Among them, the sharp-eyed Kentish plover, who dares to live so near the waves. It is one of more than 150 bird species that nest in the delta. Though the dunes lie near the beach, they form a different world. The plants are both the colonizers and the saviors of the dunes. Anchored with thick, deep roots, they hold the wind-blown sand. Observant visitors may see the scarab beetle at its lifetime task, rolling and finally burying balls of dung. Philosophers may think of the human condition. Historians may remember that on the far shore of the Mediterranean, long ago, the Egyptians held this insect holy. Modern ecologists may point to the beetle's usefulness. The mites of dung it buries with such effort may feed not only itself and its offspring, but plants as well. Behind the dunes, another world, at salty lowlands, flat as a tabletop, and little more productive. Yet close by, in an even saltier milieu, flamingo colonies find nourishment in ponds too saline to support plant life. They feed on small invertebrate animals, and even on microorganisms in the bottom ooze, which seems a low practice for such a soaring animal. Many birds, and few people, have seen the lake region of the central Camargue. It is a closed wildlife refuge, and therefore a safe nursery for dozens of species whose eggs proliferate on the island beaches each spring. Usually, the black-headed gulls are the first to establish themselves. They are likely to be the dominant species in the community, often numbering more than 1,000 couples. Black-headed gulls are strong family types, aggressive defenders of their territories and their young. Their colonies form stable centers around which other species tend to group themselves. The gull's closest neighbors are the gull-billed terns, which like the same nesting sites. Most terns are fish eaters, but these hunt the freshwater areas of the Camargue for insects, crustaceans, and an occasional frog. Despite close nesting and uniform markings, the terns never confuse their home base. The mating pairs, in the manner of most seabirds, share all the duties of brooding and raising the young. Common terns are also, appropriately, common in the bird islands, though they nest on different ground and do not mingle with their gull-billed cousins. The nesting pairs take turns at brooding and hunting. Their young are beautifully camouflaged to blend with the background. The mature birds are highly visible. The chicks have their own survival devices. Temporarily deserted by their parents, they may cower in mud cracks to escape the heat and possible predators. Smallest and shyest of the family is the little tern. Slightly smaller than a blackbird, it lays eggs of 1/4 its own weight. Sometimes there are 4 of them. Some bird island species flourish, and others struggle to survive. Camargue ornithologists are concerned about the avocet. The number of breeding pairs of this odd bird with the ski jump bill have dropped by almost 1/3 in recent years. Avocets belong to the same bird order as terns and gulls, but they have become specialized for open, very shallow, brackish water. Engineering or irrigation activities that take place miles away can cause slight transformations of their habitat, and the birds do not adapt to them. Although each avocet pair usually has a clutch of 4 or more eggs each season, many of the young do not survive. Uncounted thousands of birds crowd together on the Camargue Islands, each species with its own style of mating, brooding, and hunting, each different from all the rest. Slightly north of the islands lies a row of very ancient dunes. They are the only surviving fragment of an early climax forest, with its typical woodland flowers. This kind of pine woods environment is often preferred by the colonies of little egrets. A wading bird that hunts widely throughout the Camargue, the egret lives and nests in the treetops. Every choice of habitat strikes a balance between advantages and disadvantages. Nesting at a height protects egrets from 4-footed enemies, but it makes the first faltering steps of the young very dangerous. The uncertain antics of the fledglings are not merely playful, but part of the learning process. And for some, the process is fatal. The fledgling that falls dies and becomes food for other animals. Those that survive to maturity are among the most beautiful birds to be found in the Camargue or anywhere. In mid-Camargue lies the Vaccarès, a large, brackish lake and a favorite summer home of the bee-eaters. Though they hunt all kinds of insects, they seem to treat them all like bees and try to shake off their poisonous stings before eating them. Sometimes, a parent bee-eater seems reluctant to give up a succulent morsel to the young waiting in the tunnel nests. But in the end, it does its evolutionary duty. North of the central lake, the character of the land changes again. Soil and water are less salty. Many more plants flourish, and sometimes the land is covered with grasses. Here, the crested lark feeds its young on grasshoppers and other insects. Here, the pratincoll will sometimes choose to make its nest, and the shy stone curlew scampers at the approach of grazing sheep. Though the flocks often destroy birds' nests, their grazing maintains the short grass habitat needed by many species. The sheep, of course, are not wild animals, but neither are the so-called wild horses of the Camargue. Though they range freely through the many environments of the Central Delta, the horses are so-called wild only. Hardy and needing little help from man, they are still his property and have been for hundreds of years. They are beautiful animals, and poets have written of them as the epitome of freedom. Yet any wild bird in the Camargue is freer than they. Some, like the pendulin tit, even benefit from man's domestic animals. It is one of the species that gathers sheep's wool as well as plant fibers for nest building. The male does the basic work over a period of 4 days to 2 weeks. He works hard, often using the hairs from the horses' tails to lace his nest against the strong Camargue winds. He sings equally hard to define his territory and in hope of attracting a mate. When he has found one, they finish the nest together. But this picture of domestic bliss has an ambiguous conclusion. No sooner is one family started than the male tit begins building a second nest and hunting a second mate. Once in a while, he goes on to a third, all in the interests of survival of the species. The whole drama depends on freshwater streams or marshes to support the trees that support the nests. Those same streams are highways for freshwater animals. Through them, the turtle can travel widely, even to the reed-filled marshes where stately purple herons nest. Because herons seldom leave a nest unattended, even for a moment, This is a rarely seen spectacle. A purple heron chick on its way out. After about 4 weeks in the egg, it emerges into the windy world, helpless and hungry. Though purple herons breed in colonies, the individual nests are quite isolated, and the high reeds hide their nests not only from predators, but from one another. Purple herons are as specialized for living in reedy marshes as whiskered terns are for living in open ones. These gifted aerialists would be unable to land on a heron nest without damage from the surrounding reeds. Their nests literally float on the face of the waters, safe from enemies, though dangerous in storms. They need rushes to build the nests, but they are not strong enough to cut the stems. Therefore, they look for some bigger animals to do the work for them. In this place, it is usually the bulls which lumber through the rush-filled ponds feeding. Like the Camargue horses, the bulls are an ancient breed and independent, but not of men. Each bull has a human owner. Unowned, the purple herons are indirectly threatened. Through many generations, they have taken stately turns guarding their broods. Each changing of the watch accompanied by slow, elaborate ritual exchanges between the mating pair. Now, a threat hangs over the heron and all birds of the marshes, swamps, and wetlands. It is the threat of drainage and cultivation, the pressure of the growing population of men against the wild places. The herons are patient in everything, in hunting, in communicating, in bringing up the fish and eels for their not-so-patient young. Their slow deliberation suggests that their time is not the time of man, and theirs, perhaps, is running out. Every environment in the Rhone Delta is conditioned by its distance from the river itself. Today, the Rhone takes 2 paths to the sea, and both of them still have some patches of typical riverine forest, not yet taken over by man. Because plants do not have to struggle against salt here, they flourish on the fresh water, even though the Camargue summers are very dry. The variety of plant life, in turn, assures the survival of a great many kinds of insects. In their turn, the insects provide a happy hunting ground for insect eaters like the hoopoe, which sometimes seems to compete with its mate for the privilege of feeding the young first. One of the hoopoe's close cousins, the roller, also eats insects, although it is a big bird, and will take a small mouse when it can find one. These insectivores exert a constant pressure on the insect population, and so, of course, do the insects upon one another, with help from the arachnids. Ornithologists have reported 260 species of breeding birds in France, more than in any other West European country, thanks in no small measure to the existence of this bit of land, cradled in the two arms of the Rhone River. Yet it is only near the river that life is various and abundant in the Camargue. Summer, not extremely hot, but windy and almost rainless, brings a drama of death to many creatures of the Delta. And, as everywhere in nature, death for some means feasting for others. The sun and the dry wind, the Mistral, evaporate the water of the ponds. The fat, fresh-water carp begin to asphyxiate. In desperation, many throw themselves out of the water. Death, in the form of the voracious herring gulls, awaits them on the beach. This gull eats almost anything, including eggs and young birds. It flourishes on garbage, and its numbers have grown with the increase of human population around the Camargue. The herring gull is one bird local conservationists advocate killing to keep its numbers down. Before the full devastation of summer, the young birds must have grown strong if they are to survive. The purple heron chicks have quadrupled their size in 5 weeks on their diet of food regurgitated from their parents' stomachs. They are becoming more playful and more independent, if not more beautiful. They will test their wings in another week. Their parents' job is nearly over. Soon the high reed marshes will be dotted with empty nests. As autumn approaches, many inhabitants of the bird islands and of the surrounding flatlands form migratory assemblies and prepare their flights to the south. The young are strong enough. The time of warmth and sunshine is passing. Now come the rains that would have saved the freshwater fish and encouraged plants to grow in the barren salt flats. But the waters will produce a different proliferation of life. An almost perpetual twilight closes over the Camargue. The sun-baked mud soaks up the chilly rain. The winter landscape looks deserted, but this is far from true. Nature is more economical than that. She has replaced one cast of characters with another. The ducks have come in variety and in great numbers. 150,000 at least make their winter quarters here. The Camargue is one of the few places left in Western Europe that can support a population of this size. It is a good time for hunters, both human and animal. The marsh harrier, though mainly a mouse eater, will take ducks when it can. This time, however, its target is a covey of coots. Slowly the earth turns and the hands of many biological clocks point toward spring. The heart of the Camargue turns green again, as it has for many thousands of years. Triangular and flashing scarlet, migrating flights of flamingos return from their Spanish and African retreats to the Camargue salt marshes. And all around their refuge, men are busy. If the flamingos flew further in any direction, they would come to men. To the north, they are cultivating rice in fields irrigated by water coming from the Rhone. Rice and other grains and vineyards for a human population that will have doubled in this region by the year 2000. So this too is a part of the Camargue, the geometric handiwork of man. To the south and east, men flood the land with seawater and let the sun evaporate it. They are producing salt. For centuries, the Camargue salt works were small. Now they are large and supply the demands of the new chemical and plastics industries. Where the salt works are established, very little grows. Further east, a huge maritime and industrial complex is taking shape on the far bank of the Rhone. Plans for its expansion are almost infinite. To the west, houses march down the beach toward the Camargue. Men, having to eat and work, also need something of unspoiled nature. Yet they press against the small wilderness places all over the world. The question is whether the world will be worth man's possessing if all the wild places disappear.